Some nightmares don't begin with a scream. They begin with something that feels completely normal. A quiet moment, a familiar face, a choice that seems harmless. But sometimes, one small moment is enough to destroy everything. Welcome to KTS Mosan, because what happens next isn't just terrifying, it's the kind of mystery that never truly lets go. The story begins at a large farmhouse surrounded by open fields, greenery, and complete silence. A husband and wife live there, longing to hear the laughter of a child in their home. Tori is the wife and Kyle is the husband. They love each other deeply. The peaceful farm feels untouched by the outside world, yet something unseen is already beginning to stir beyond the fields. That same night, while they are together, something strange happens. Tori suddenly feels like something happened outside. She asks Kyle if he felt it too, but he says no. A moment later, Tori agrees that whatever it was seems to be gone. Suddenly, a loud noise erupts outside, and the entire house loses power. Through the window, far beyond the fields, a faint red glow slowly pulses in the distance. Far across the darkness, that mysterious red light continues glowing softly, as if calling attention to itself. Old home videos appear, showing a small child growing up. First he rolls over in bed, then he sits up. Soon he begins crawling on his knees. Later, he can be seen riding on a tractor with Kyle in the fields. Watching these memories is enough to melt anyone's heart. But that happiness doesn't last long, because what happens next is something nobody could have imagined. The warm memories feel comforting, but they quietly lead towards something far more unsettling. 10 years later, the same house looks older and more worn down. One morning, Tori is searching for her son. His name is Brandon. She searches all through the house for him. He isn't in his room. He isn't in the kitchen either. So she heads outside. The property is quiet, except for the distant sounds drifting across the open farmland. She whistles and waits. A few moments later, a whistle answers back. Tori starts walking toward an old rusty barn where the sound came from. Suddenly, Brandon jumps out in front of her and scares her. Tori lets out a scream. Then she playfully scolds him and says he's getting older now and should stop acting like a little kid. Even as she tries to sound serious, her affection for him is impossible to hide. Still, she treats him with all the love she would give a much younger child. Kyle arrives and reminds Brandon that he is not allowed inside the barn because there are broken boards and exposed nails inside. At school that day, the class is learning about bees and wasps. The teacher shows a video and asks what the difference is between them. The entire class stays silent, but Brandon raises his hand and gives the correct answer. He explains that bees help with pollination while wasps are predators. Then he keeps going, sharing even more information until the other kids begin getting bored. His knowledge stands out immediately, though not everyone around him appreciates it. A heavy-set boy makes a sarcastic comment about him, and the whole class bursts into laughter. But Brandon's favorite girl in class encourages him. That small compliment brings a smile to his face, and for a moment he seems genuinely happy. For a brief second, the embarrassment fades away and something brighter takes its place. Yet inside his notebook, he keeps drawing strange symbols that nobody can understand. They look like some unknown language that only he knows. That night, while Tori is painting and listening to music at home, a red glow slowly begins rising behind the barn outside. A deep and frightening sound starts spreading through the air. The strange light grows stronger outside, while the atmosphere around the house becomes increasingly uneasy. The lights in the house begin flickering. The music starts distorting, but Tori doesn't panic. She simply turns the music off and continues painting as if she has become used to these strange events. Meanwhile, upstairs in his room, Brandon is lying perfectly still in bed. Then, something unusual moves through his body, almost as if something has awakened him. He gets up and walks toward the window. Without showing any fear, he climbs down and starts heading toward the barn. There is a locked door there that is always kept secured with chains. Drawn by something he cannot resist, Brandon moves toward the chain door without hesitation. He drops to his knees and starts pulling on the chains. Tori hears the noise and steps outside. Tori sees Brandon kneeling in front of the chain door inside the barn. The moment she touches his shoulder, Brandon suddenly jumps. He looks frightened too. He has no idea how he got there. The fear on his face feels genuine, as if he has just awakened from somewhere he cannot remember. Tori hugs him and softly tells him that maybe he was sleepwalking. She takes him back to his room and tucks him into bed. Then she sings him a lullaby and gently pats him for a long time, treating him as if he is still a little child. Later, Kyle comes outside and asks if everything is okay. Tori lies and says that Brandon was only wandering around the house in his sleep. She leaves out the most important detail: the barn, the chains, and the door he should never have been near. She never tells him that Brandon was at the barn, standing near that chain door. It is a small lie, but its roots run deep. The next morning, Brandon and Kyle spend time repairing parts of the house. Kyle gives him a piece of candy and tells him that when he was little, candy always stopped him from crying. Brandon asks if it actually worked. Kyle laughs along, but beneath the smile, there is a quiet uncertainty he cannot fully hide. Kyle laughs and says maybe it did, because Brandon seems to have turned out just fine. fine. They both laugh, but there is a trace of uneasiness in Kyle's voice, almost as if he is trying to convince himself. That same day, Brandon is outside trying to start the lawnmower, but the machine refuses to run, and little by little, his frustration begins building. What starts as irritation quickly turns into something far more difficult to explain. Suddenly, he lifts the heavy mower and throws it over the fence. Anyone who witnessed it would be stunned. When he walks over to it, the machine is lying upside down with its blade still spinning. Brandon moves his finger close to the blade, but instead of cutting him, the blade itself breaks apart. The moment lasts only seconds, yet it raises questions nobody is prepared to answer. That day is Brandon's birthday, and the family gathers at a restaurant. Tori's sister Marilee and her husband Noah are there as well. A waitress brings out a cake and lights a candle on top. Brandon blows out the candle, and everyone celebrates, but then Noah gives him a rifle as a birthday gift. Kyle immediately gets upset and says Brandon is still a kid and has no business having something like that. The celebration shifts instantly from joyful to painfully uncomfortable for everyone watching. For the first time, Brandon talks back to his father and says he is already 12 years old. Kyle still refuses to give him the rifle, and Brandon's face turns red with anger. The entire restaurant watches, and people begin whispering among themselves. The family leaves, and every eye remains fixed on them as they walk out. It is an embarrassing moment, but it is only the beginning. The tension inside the family keeps growing, even after the argument is over. Back at home, Tori tells Kyle that she does not want Brandon to go through what Kyle experienced with his own parents. He was never understood, and she does not want her son feeling that same loneliness. The two discuss taking a camping trip together, but the next morning, Brandon completely ignores his father. Sitting at the breakfast table, he quietly chews on his fork. Something about his behavior feels off, and Kyle notices it immediately. Kyle looks closer and realizes the fork is bent. Alarmed, he calls Tori, and together they begin searching Brandon's room. Inside, they find drawings of human body parts and blood. The images look disturbing, like something created by a troubled mind. Tori suggests that maybe Brandon wants to become a doctor. Tori searches for a reasonable explanation, but Kyle cannot shake the feeling that something is wrong. Kyle cannot accept that explanation. Deep down, he feels that something is seriously wrong. That same night, Brandon's favorite girl suddenly senses that someone is inside her room. Her laptop begins hivane strangely. When she looks out the window, she sees a figure standing in the darkness outside. Her mother comes in moments later, but by then, nobody is there. The girl says, frightened, that it was Brandon. Her mother asks how she could possibly know that in the dark. The girl quietly answers that she would recognize him anywhere. Her certainty is unsettling, especially because she never hesitates for even a second. One night, during a camping trip in the woods, Tori wakes up and realizes Brandon is missing. She and Kyle start searching for him. Then Brandon suddenly appears in front of them, but his eyes seem distant, almost as if he has just returned from somewhere else entirely. Kyle watches him carefully and keeps his thoughts to himself. Tori chooses to close her eyes to it once again. The answers seem close, yet both parents continue avoiding what is right in front of them. Back at school, a major incident happens during gym class. Brandon's favorite girl calls him a name he does not like. Brandon reacts instantly and grabs her so hard that a bone in her hand snaps. She screams in pain, while Brandon appears completely unaware of what he is doing. The school erupts into chaos. Later, the girl's mother calls Brandon an animal in front of Kyle and Tori. For the first time, the fear surrounding Brandon is no longer confined to his own family. Tori apologizes, and they take Brandon home. That night, the house is silent. Tori tells Kyle that Brandon has never been hurt. He has never been scratched. He has never broken a bone. That realization feels deeply strange, because every child gets hurt growing up. The more Tori thinks about it, the harder it becomes to ignore. She begins searching online for answers. Meanwhile, the red light appears once again outside. During a rainstorm, Brandon walks to the chain door inside the barn. This time, he tears the chain apart with his bare hands. When Tori arrives, she sees Brandon floating in the air, surrounded by a glowing red light. Over and over, he repeats the same words, "Take the world." The impossible scene unfolds right in front of her, leaving no room for denial anymore. When Tori calls out to him, he falls back to the ground. For the first time in his life, he has a scratch. Brandon looks terrified. He turns toward his mother and asks, "Mom, who am I?" The question hits Tori like a storm. She embraces him and finally tells him the truth. She says he is a special child who came from space. The secret she protected for years finally comes crashing into the open. She explains that she and Kyle found him inside a small spacecraft, which is still hidden inside the barn. Brandon's eyes burn with anger. He demands to know why they kept this from him for so many years. He starts destroying things around the house before storming out. Tori tells Kyle that Brandon found the ship, and Kyle's face immediately turns pale. That night, Kyle has a terrifying dream. In it, he and Tori discover the spacecraft. Inside is a tiny child. In the dream, blood is running from Tori's eyes, while the small child reaches out toward her. The nightmare feels less like a dream and more like a memory twisted into something horrifying. Kyle wakes up drenched in sweat. By now, Brandon's powers are fully awakened. He goes to the same restaurant where the family had visited before. A waitress notices strange symbols scratched onto a window. Suddenly, Suddenly, a light bulb overhead explodes, and a piece of glass flies directly into her eye. The waitress stumbles around in agony. She grabs a baseball bat and moves through the darkness in fear. Eventually, she locks herself inside the walk-in freezer. She believes the heavy door will protect her, but Brandon is no ordinary threat. For Brandon, the thick door is no obstacle at all. Using his strength, he slices halfway through it and enters. The next morning, investigators arrive at the scene. They find the strange symbols on the window, but the waitress is gone. Back at home, Brandon acts completely calm, as if nothing happened. The contrast is terrifying. While others suffer, Brandon remains perfectly composed. His parents, however, are falling apart inside. At school, Brandon begins counseling sessions. The situation is unusual because the counselor is his own aunt, Mary Lee. Brandon tells Mary Lee that he is different from everyone else and better than them. The statement sounds less like confidence and more like a warning. The words leave Mary Lee shaken. She quietly decides that she should go to the police and tell them everything, but Brandon hears her thoughts. That same night, the lights inside Merle's house begin flickering. Her home security system alerts her that someone is in the backyard. Gathering her courage, she opens the door and finds Brandon standing there. His eyes are cold. His voice is completely emotionless. He tells her to forget about going to the police. Merle's hands begin trembling. For the first time, she understands just how dangerous Brandon has become. Even so, she insists that reporting him is her responsibility. Brandon leaves. A short time later, Merle's husband Noah comes home after drinking. When he opens a closet door, he finds Brandon standing inside, wearing a terrifying mask. Noah becomes angry and says he is taking him back to his parents. Brandon calmly tells him not to tell anyone. Then he uses his strength to slam Noah into the wall of the garage. What follows feels less like an attack and more like a display of overwhelming power. Terrified, Noah manages to get into his vehicle and tries to escape, but Brandon lifts the vehicle into the air and flips it over. Noah's head smashes into the steering wheel, breaking his teeth. He is severely injured. Brandon uses Noah's blood to draw his strange symbols on the ground, then quietly returns home. Back at home, Brandon tells his parents a false story and claims he has no idea where his shirt went. His explanation sounds simple on the surface, but the tension in the room keeps growing. The next day, Tori and Kyle learn that Noah's in the hospital. They rush there immediately, but the doctor tells them that Noah's condition is so severe that visitors are not allowed to see him. Merle, still shaken, tells them that Brandon came to their house that night. The moment they hear this, it feels like the ground disappears beneath their feet. The fear on their faces says far more than words ever could. The following morning, Brandon is told that Noah is gone. His face shows no emotion, no sadness, no shock. Kyle cannot handle it anymore and raises his voice. Brandon responds by shoving him, sending him crashing into a cabinet. Dishes fall and shatter. Silence fills the room. For the first time, the bond between father and son is broken in a way that cannot be ignored. That night, while Brandon is taking a shower, Kyle searches his room. There, he finds a shirt stained with blood. Kyle's heart sinks. He shows the shirt to Tori and tells her that he believes it belongs to Noah. Tori refuses to believe it. Even with the evidence in front of her, accepting the truth feels impossible. She argues that Noah had been drinking and driving and that what happened was his own fault. By now, a deep divide has formed between Kyle and Tori. Kyle makes a decision. He tells Tori that he is taking Brandon on a hunting trip, just him and his son. The next morning, Cal secretly places a rifle in the truck and leaves with Brandon. Before they go, Tori hugs Brandon and reminds him to wear his seatbelt. She smiles on the outside, but inside, she senses that Kyle is hiding something. While they're gone, a detective arrives at the house. He shows Tori the strange symbols that were found on the restaurant window. He says the markings might be initials and suggests they could point toward Brandon Breyer. Tori claims she has never seen the symbol before, and the detective leaves. But the moment he is gone, she runs to Brandon's room and finds his sketchbook. What she discovers inside removes the last traces of doubt. The sketchbook is filled with disturbing drawings, blood, destruction, and scenes that do not seem possible for a child to imagine. Looking at them, Tori finally becomes convinced that Brandon is connected to everything that has happened. The sketchbook slips from her hands as tears fill her eyes. At that same moment in the woods, Kyle raises his rifle, aims at Brandon, and pulls the trigger. But the bullet never reaches Brandon. In a single instant, Kyle realizes that everything he believed about Brandon was wrong. The shot has no effect. Tears fill Kyle's eyes. He is completely broken inside. Brandon slowly turns around. His eyes begin glowing red. In that moment, Kyle understands his mistake, but it is already too late. Brandon puts on the dark mask and cape he has hidden away. The confrontation reaches its tragic conclusion, and Kyle is gone. It becomes the darkest turning point in the entire story. A father tries to stop his son, and the son destroys the only father he has ever known. Back at home, Tori calls Kyle, but instead of Kyle's voice, Brandon answers. His voice is cold and emotionless. He tells her that his father is gone. Then the call ends. The final thread holding the family together snaps apart completely. Tori tries calling emergency services, but the connection is lost. Soon afterward, police vehicles arrive at the property. Terrified, Tori remains hidden. When she finally runs toward an officer for help, Brandon attacks. Everything happens so quickly that nobody has time to react. Moments Moments later, he turns his attention toward a female police officer. As the nightmare continues to unfold, Tori keeps screaming, but her screams reveal her location, and Brandon immediately knows where she is. The sound meant to save her ends up guiding Brandon straight to her. Then Brandon whistles the same way Tori used to whistle when she was searching for him as a child. It is one of the most chilling moments in the entire story. Somehow, Tori manages to climb out for a window and run to the barn. There, she sees the spacecraft that had been hidden for all those years. Suddenly, she remembers something important. A piece of the ship can hurt Brandon. For the first time, she has something that might actually stop him. She grabs a sharp fragment, but inside the barn, she discovers something even more horrifying. The missing waitress is hanging from the wall. She has been gone for weeks. Tori's entire body begins trembling. Gathering every bit of courage she has left, Tori steps outside and calls Brandon's name. Then she whistles. Fear and love collide as she prepares for the hardest choice of her life. Brandon appears in front of her. Tears fill Tori's eyes. She tells him that she has always loved him and that he will always be her child. She pulls him into a tight embrace, and in that same moment, she tries to drive the sharp fragment into his back, but Brandon catches her hand before she can do it. The betrayal hurts him more deeply than any weapon ever could. The pain in Brandon's eyes is enough to break any mother's heart. He knows that his mother just tried to kill him. First his father, now Tori. Brandon grabs her and flies high into the sky, rising above the clouds. Then he lets go. Tori falls toward the ground below. The bond that once held them together finally shatters beyond repair. As she falls, Brandon looks down one last time. Then he notices lights appearing in the sky above him. They are moving toward him. Afterward, a television news report appears. The report states that a plane crashed on the farm, destroying the house. Nearly everyone on board loses their life. To the world, it looks like a tragic accident, but the truth is far more disturbing. One survivor remains, Brandon Breyer. The reporter explains that the cause of the crash is still unknown, and that the investigation is ongoing. But anyone who knows the full story understands that this is no accident. It is Brandon's power. Power that is no longer under anyone's control. He is a child who came from space. He arrived with a mission, and now there is nobody left standing in his way. Some stories end, but some never really leave you. If stories like this stay with you, subscribe to KTS Mosan. Until the next story, don't just remember what happened, remember what it cost.